Hi there. I want to talk a little bit about the cycle of commitment. This comes from some work that I've been doing recently with Spoken Wheel, as we have been really talking about what are the fundamental elements of trust. And one of the things that comes up where trust can really fall apart is when we don't believe people are being reliable. Now, oftentimes, this is happening because we're not actually making clear commitments, or we're not really clear about what our requests are or even what is being requested of us. Also, would say that sometimes we agree to do things that we're not actually really able to do or not ready to do. I definitely can admit to having done that in my life. And so I want to talk a little bit about the cycle of commitment. This is developed a bit by this gentleman, Charles Feltman, in this book here, which is called Trust, an Essential Primer for Building Trust at Work. I want to talk about how this really applies to everything in all of our relationships. So the first element of this process of the cycle of commitment is the request. Now, someone is going to be asking a request, and they're kind of like the customer, and the other person is going to be the performer. They're the ones who are receiving the request. So when you're making a request, a couple elements you want to make sure that you think about. So first of all, getting really clear about who is making the request. Are you making the request for the other person, or are you asking on behalf of someone else? Who's the person who's actually looking for the thing to happen? Getting clear about that. So who's making the request? And then who are you making the request of? Maybe you're asking the actual person who you're speaking to about that, or maybe you're asking them to take responsibility for finding someone else to do it. So getting clear about who's making the request and who's supposed to fulfill the request. It's a good place to start. The next piece is what you want the request to be. This is really important to be super specific about what it is that you would like to see done. But a part that people miss often here is also a conversation about why is it needed to be done? What kind of need are you trying to meet? What kind of, what's the goal of this request? This is important because it'll help the other person understand, like what are the nuances of the thing. And if somehow they can't fulfill the request, they might be able to offer other ways of getting those needs met or meeting that goal. So what are you asking and why are you asking it? Next point is to be really clear about your timeline, making sure that you make sure that the other person understands when is the thing going to need to be finished by. And then there's this piece about how. How would you like it to be done, and how would you like the final product to be delivered? Now, this may seem obvious in some cases, but it's really important to communicate about whether or not you want to get updates throughout the process. Or whether or not you have specific things you'd like to be seen. Maybe it needs to be digital, or maybe it needs to be analog, or maybe it needs to be in the form of a video or an email. Getting clear about what are the criteria for what would be a satisfactory outcome for the request. So once the request is made, the next part of the cycle is responding to the request. And this is where the performer of the request comes in. So if you're the person who's going to be performing or doing the request, the first thing to do is kind of a self-assessment. Am I able to do this? Is this something that I want to do? Is this something that I have all the resources for? Do I have enough time to do this? Making sure that you're actually able to fulfill the request before agreeing to it can be really important. So perhaps perhaps you've heard the request, you can do it, you have the time, you have the tools, and everything was really clear, and so the answer might just be yes. So that would be sort of the first response. Another thing, though, is consider is it's also really important if you're not able to do something or you don't want to be doing something, make sure that you say no. Being able to say no to things that people ask of you is a really wonderful way of building trust and getting them to understand that first of all, that your yeses actually have value, and being able to say no when things don't work for you, is actually a really great way of showing that you know who you are and you know it's possible. And boundaries are a huge part of building trust. So maybe you've heard the request, but you're not really sure if you can do it. So this is where a part of negotiation comes in. You might be able to need to make a counter offer. You might need to be able to say, I can do it, but not in that timeline. Or I need to have some other resources. Or I need more clarity about what you're asking about. Making sure that you actually get clarity about this is really important. So it's possible, always, because consent is always true, that it's really important to be able to say, hey, I don't, yes, I can do it, or I want to do it, but here are the qualities or the qualifications. And negotiating that and getting clear about those negotiations is really important. Another sort of option is you might commit to commit. You might say, yes, I want to do it, but first, I need to do something else first, or check in on something else. And if you do that, make sure you're clear about what your timeline is. Once you've decided exactly what the agreement is and what is going to be happening or what action is going to be coming as a result of the request, when you're getting clear about what you're committing to, go ahead and document it. This is actually really useful in these remote times to go ahead and write down exactly what it is. This is what I'm doing. This is why. This is when it's going to be finished. This is what it's going to look like in the end. And here are the ways that I'm going to check in throughout the process. A shorthand for writing any really good agreement or contract is to consider the 5 or 6 question words. So you might, document who is going to do what, when are they going to do it, why are they going to do it, how are they going to do it, who, what, where, when, why, and how. So then the final thing is actually completing the request. So once you go ahead and made an agreement to do something and you've committed to doing something, it's really important to actually acknowledge when you have finished it and making sure that you communicate that is finished. It is in your drive or is in your inbox. And another great thing here, and this is how you really make sure that this whole cycle is complete, and this is really key to sort of building ongoing trust and effective relationships, is to go ahead and ask, you know what, I finished this. I think that I did it the way you wanted. Do you have any feedback? Is there anything you specifically would like to change? Is there anything I can change to make it better? Making sure to acknowledge or demonstrate to the other person that you're willing to hear whether or not the thing was satisfactory is really important. Now, sometimes these are words we just throw around, and not everyone is always really excited to give feedback because it seems to have sort of a negative connotation often. So another thing you can do is ask specific questions. So I'm curious about this element and this element. Is that where you were thinking? Or I wasn't really sure if this was happening. Can you look at that for me? And just to acknowledge that, you're willing to make the repairs and make the changes that are necessary. That's the kind of thing that will help demonstrate that you can be a reliable person in your commitments. So thank you for listening to this short piece about the cycle of commitment. You can find out more information about this at spokeandwheel.co. That's spokeandwheel.co. And you also can contact us if you're interested in learning more about how to build trust, the different elements of trust. Those are all things that my colleague and I would love to talk to you about. You can reach us at calendly.com/spoke-wheel. I'll put some links over there in the video for you so you can check this out. But in the meantime, thank you so much for listening, and let's go ahead and make sure that we are making commitments that we know we want to do and that we know that we can do. Because not only is this going to be built creating a better world for ourselves, but also it's a way that we show the world that we can be reliable and be reliable partners and have stronger relationships. So thank you for listening, and have a great day.